We've got two new ranges of 40k miniatures coming in early 2025, new Death Core of Krieg for the Guard, and some reimagined Aspect Warriors for the Aeldari. Let's talk through the many options that Games Workshop has to choose from, and which one might be the best or most likely to receive updates. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking model releases, and this one I wanted to talk a bit more about the Aeldari and Krieg releases that we're getting in January, and what sort of things the factions most need. In that 40k roadmap preview at the Nova Open, I feel like they decided to share the news as to two major range refreshes coming to two armies in about the most underwhelming way possible, announcing them when they're both over 4 months away at this point, plus not giving any sort of miniature teasers or any sort of exact dates besides broadly 2025, but despite that it's still really quite big news for two pretty big and well followed factions in Astra Militarum and Aeldari. The first codex in the new year will be Guard. They've confirmed that there's going to be a new release wave for them, and specifically that it'll be a Death Core Krieg release wave. And then after that, there'll be Codex Aeldari, and that'll bring along with it a wave of plastic Aspect Warriors of some sort. After that, there's Imperial Knights as well, which certainly could be interesting, but given that they didn't actually confirm there's any new miniatures coming alongside for them, it's maybe a little bit less interesting at this point. Given that the vast majority of these are likely to be resculpts of pre-existing kits that we know about, I thought it could be interesting to talk through a few possibilities for both factions, starting out with the Imperial Guard and then moving on to the Aeldari. First up, let's start with the Death Core of Krieg, which is interesting that they're going to be the other regiment supported in a big way besides Cadians now. I guess that'll give Guard collectors the options of Cadians, Kaschans, or Death Core, unless they decide to retire Kaschan kits. Maybe it was a little bit unexpected versus remaking the Kaschans, which have been crying out for an update for a while. There's certainly no denying their fan favourite though, an Imperial Guard World War I themed army with plenty of gas masks, cavalry and artillery, developed in the Forge World Imperial Armour books, which brought loads of depth to their lore and units, and they do have a pretty fun unique backstory, fighting a grueling centuries-long civil war to keep their planet loyal to the Imperium and not turn against them, turning their planet into a hellscape in the process, and Krieg soldiers are rumoured to be vat-grown and famously happy to lay down their lives for the Imperium. A cult of sacrifice and duty pervades the entire world and the regiments drawn from it. Out of all the Forge World armies of Warhammer 40k, they were arguably the biggest and most developed of any of them. Loads of unique themed options for them, either things that were basically near equivalents of more standard Guard units, and lots of stuff that has their own variants or things entirely unique to them. This range though has been gradually eroded over the years and bits of it phased out. It's been Games Workshop's vision for a while to make the entire Warhammer 40k range all into plastic, and not have certain factions have an enormous back catalogue of Forge World models to support and balance every time they do a new edition or anything. That's meant that quite a lot of that's gone to Legends, though it does mean they've got loads of options for kits to develop when they bring them into plastic. Besides giving us the words Death Core, they weren't really too specific as to what sort of things will be coming for them, but they did say a division of new kits, and that certainly implies more than 2 or 3 to me, so probably a fairly standard sized 40k release wave. They described it as a full Death Core release, adding a bunch of new things to join their Veteran Guardsman Kill Team box. I'd bear in mind as well though that this comes in the context of most 40k Forge World things being retired when their codex comes out. The Guard have got a pretty enormous Forge World range, including plenty of Death Core units still in that. There's a reasonable chance that anything there will have its rules sent to Legends and a bunch of the kits removed as well. For the codexes that have come out so far, the only things that remain in the Forge World catalogue for them tend to be the really big stuff, generally Titanic scale models that aren't really regularly used in normal 40k games. Talking through the options for the Kriegsmen though, perhaps the single one that seems the most shoe-in would be the Death Riders of Krieg. I say these guys are the single best known unit besides their standard infantry. Krieg cavalry with hunting lances, riding disturbing gas mask mounts with clawed feet, looking very much like horses but disturbingly not so. Over the years they have been one of Forge World's slightly more sought after units, though I'm sure that dropped off a bit when they decided to break them up into individual model listings and sell them one by one. Each rider is now $33 or £21 I believe, so $165 for a squad of 5, which is kind of madness even for Games Workshop. Given their popularity, I'd be kind of surprised if they didn't get a resculpt, though I guess it does mean within the Guard range you'd then have 2 different cavalry units that fill a kind of similar role with similar gear in the Attilan Rough Riders and these Death Riders. And judging by what they've done for other kit releases, I'd suspect they'd probably have individual datasheets for them, so I guess that could be a little bit unusual. I guess they could still give them different battlefield roles I suppose, maybe giving one of the units scouts and reactive movement type keywords or something like that, and one being a bit more focused on damage perhaps. I guess we'll see what they do with them. They could also potentially do either command sections or characters for this. I certainly wouldn't be too surprised if we got something like a mounted Krieg Commissar on steeds. For infantry things, I feel like there's at least some chance we'll get a more basic line infantry type unit to go alongside the Death Corps veterans. I'm not 100% sure of that, and I'm also not 100% sure we really need one when we've got the veteran box set, which does quite well to represent their infantry in game at the moment, I think. It's a really fun and characterful kit. But perhaps if they go like they did with the Kroot Farstalkers and the Kroot Mercenaries, they might do a different version and have the veteran one represent actual veterans in the codex and have a more simplistic unit, maybe more with las guns and things. I'd guess the regular kit would cost a bit less, as the Kroot Mercenaries one does. I'm not sure if they'll go that way or not. I feel like it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to have both, but at the same time, if it comes at the expense of releasing a different infantry unit, that could maybe be a bit of a shame. Otherwise, the Death Corps have got a couple of elite infantry units to draw on. Their combat engineers were quite well known. They were a kind of interesting unit for the Guard both in 8th edition and 9th edition with their scary close range shotguns and gas grenades. Plus they've got the fun burrowing mold launcher explosive as well, which could add some other interest to the unit too. The Death Corps also have their Grenadier Squad, which are basically guardsmen with hotshot las guns, the Krieg equivalent of stormtroopers, though I'd guess they're probably going to be a little bit less likely than the combat engineers of the two. I just feel like when we've got Tempestus Scions, Kazakin and Tempestus Aquilons, putting yet more stormtroopers with hotshot las guns maybe seems a bit less likely, unless Games Workshop wants to go a bit more completionist and just give each specialty regiment their own version. I'm sure the release will come with at least one character unit and maybe a couple. Of these they could do the Quartermaster Cadre, could be interesting as a fun and disturbing Krieg medic unit, maybe giving them their own command squad, which I guess they might do if they want to bring them into line with things like the Cadians and the Kaschans. And I'd maybe be a little bit surprised if we don't have a generic leader for them, maybe in the equivalent of the Cadian Castellan. I guess this one would be a Death Corps Marshal, as an individual officer choice to join units and issue orders. It would be quite nice for Krieg units if he did stick around and he kept his very good feel no pain type rule. It can make them a very interesting choice in game with just how tanky they are. For rumour engines, there's a couple of things that might just fit with a couple of Krieg units. On the right at the top here, we've got an Imperial Guard banner with a bullet hole in it. I could easily believe that that was a reinterpreted version of the Command Squad banner that you can see here. That one does feel is kind of specific. And I wonder if the servo skull that's dispensing the cloth type thing could be maybe a medical type one, though I guess it could be parchment or something. Otherwise, quite a lot of other possibilities. Death Corps had rules for a Storm Chimera, though I can't really see Games Workshop releasing an alternative Chimera sculpt just for them, to be honest. If they got a more standard tracked vehicle, I'd put more odds on the Centaur potentially. A lightly armed battlefield tractor and transporter, often mounting a heavy stubber and doing duties towing field guns around. I think it is quite a fun little cute mini tank as well. And again, if they wanted to go with the staples of Command Squad, Heavy Weapon Squad and Infantry Squad like they have with Cadians and Kaschans, they could do Death Corps Heavy Weapons. That might mean some different choices like Heavy Stubbers being on offer. I really don't know whether they'll go just for the traditional Guard staples or try and realise more Forge World Krieg units. Then otherwise, there's a couple of units in the Forge World range that aren't necessarily only Death Corps of Krieg focused. The Hades breaching drill to allow a team of Guard engineers to burrow up in the midst of enemy lines. I feel like that one would be a pretty fun one and fairly well received if they did come out with it in plastic. And also potentially some sort of heavy artillery carriage. The Krieg have a lot of these to choose from, whether it's a heavy mortar, earthshaker, or a quad gun type thing, or the mighty high impact Medusa cannon. I feel like one of these would definitely be on theme for a Krieg release. I certainly wonder if something like that might potentially be coming with the teasers of bullet-riddled sandbags and a minefield type marker. I could just imagine those sort of things being on a sort of wider scenic base for a great big field emplacement gun. Though if not, then it seems like it's likely something else Guard with really quite a big base. But massive great big backfield carriage gun will be my first guess. I suppose for this one they do already have the field ordnance batteries, which might have a bit of overlap of role there. Not sure if that makes this one a bit less likely. But I feel like there's room in the range for both, given that they already exist at the moment. And the big guns like the Medusa and the Earthshaker have definitely seen play in 10th edition, even with Games Workshop not liking the power of indirect fire and giving it lots of nerfs. In any case, it will be interesting to see just how much the Krieg get out of those options, and whether or not there's any other surprises, or they do something a bit creative with some new units along with the rest. I feel like most likely would be the Death Riders and the Command Squad and maybe a Marshal character. And lots of things feel like they could easily be done, but I guess we'll wait and see whether or not they choose to. There's definitely going to be some things on the list of stuff that we've talked about that they do come out with, and some that fall by the wayside. In any case, if they follow the same pattern as the last 3 factions that got a release wave in 10th, it will likely come with a launch box with the codex, much as we had with Cadia stands last time around, and likely at the same time updating the combat patrol. So I guess the one with the field ordnance batteries and the sentinels doesn't have that much longer left. And again, just to try and draw parallels with the Cadian release, they could well do a Death Corps of Krieg upgrade sprue. They do have the Cadian one with the tank commander. That could be an option for a bunch of Krieg-themed parts to personalise other guard units. In any case, it's going to be a big shake-up for the Astra Militarum when it drops. Hopefully they manage to give them a few interesting and useful detachments. As mentioned though, it could be bad news for anyone who's big into their Forge World Imperial Guard. A lot of things are going to be going to Legends when the Codex comes out, and the Guard do have a pretty huge amount of Forge World choices. Otherwise, the other big release that we know about are the Aeldari. They'll be the next Codex after Guard, and from Games Workshop's previews, they said there'll be some Aeldari launches, really rounding out some of the Aspect Warriors with new sculpts. That was the exact quote from the live stream. And then in the Warhammer community article, they said not the only ones to receive new aspects of their army in plastic, the next faction to swoop into stores are Aeldari. That use of the word swoop just seems to be a little bit on the nose there. I guess that means that both the Aeldari and the Astra Militarum are getting release waves 2 editions in a row. It does often seem to be the way that they do things, really have a very big release for 1 edition and then come out with a maybe similar size, perhaps slightly smaller one the edition after. For the Aeldari, given that they're all parts of the current range, the kits that people are expecting are perhaps fairly obvious. Swooping Hawks, Fire Dragons and Warp Spiders are all really quite old miniatures at this point. I would argue that for their age they've all held up really quite well, to be honest, but for their age is quite a big caveat given that the Warp Spiders I believe are over 30 years old now, the single oldest kit that's in the mainline 40k range currently. Given that aspects were mentioned by name, and the hints seem to imply that there's multiple aspects, not just one, there's a pretty good chance that all of these get updated, though I guess they could always choose to leave one behind if they wanted to. It does feel like this could be the opportunity to go at least kind of completist though and bring them into modern plastics. So far they've done 4 out of the 7 of the main classic aspect warriors, Striking Scorpions getting a Kill Team release early in 10th edition. I guess Swooping Hawks are kind of guaranteed though, given their teaser of the word swoop in the reveal. Otherwise, perhaps the most expected miniatures might be reimagined Phoenix Lords. We've had Jane Zar and Morgan Ra come out alongside their aspects in the past. Karandras didn't materialise at the same time as the Striking Scorpions and feels like he'd be odds on as a result, and otherwise that'll leave Azaman, Bararoth and Fugan. The Warp Spider's not currently having a Phoenix Lord, though it seemed that Chapter Master Valriker posted a couple of rumours saying that they might get one. That really would be pretty fun if so. I guess that would be something to add that's new to the Aeldari as well as just updates. I feel like if they're going to release that, you probably hope that they're going to redo all of these guys as well, particularly given that all of these are no longer on sale on the Games Workshop web store, so currently missing in action and not available to buy. Really hope they manage to do them justice. I feel like Jane Zar was done quite well, and I had seen what looked like a leaked image of Azaman in the past, maybe make it a bit more likely that he might turn up. For Games Workshop though, even if they just redid all of the standard aspect warriors and released 4 Phoenix Lords, that would already be a fairly chunky release. After all, we've just had the Blood Angels and they only really got 1 unique squad and then 5 characters. They'd already basically have been doing better than them. Otherwise, for possibilities, there's a couple of resin characters still left in the Aeldari HQ line. Prince Irial Autarch of Iandin, the guy who bears the Twilight Spear of Doom, and Illic Night Spear, the Ranger of Iandin. These 2 again are resin miniatures and are out of production at the moment, and again given the normal trend of 10th edition, things that don't tend to have models on sale don't tend to get rules anymore, so I'd be a bit apprehensive as to these 2 surviving into the codex. If either of them did get a miniature resculpt, I'd probably put more money on Iriel versus Illic, given he's just a bit better known in the backstory. Though I feel like even if they did happen not to get miniature releases this time around, they sort of seem perfectly placed for something like a filler release for a different codex and a different edition. So even if they go, there maybe is a chance they might not be gone completely for good. One other small possibility could be that they could release Amelin's Shadow Guide, the ranger character from Blackstone Fortress, and make her into a sort of Ranger-in-Chief style character, much as they did with Daedalus being the techno-archaeologist for the Adeptus Mechanicus, or those Ministorum priests coming back. Maybe that's a bit more of an out there possibility though. We didn't get Daek Grek re-release for the Tower alongside the Kroot. But I feel like if they wanted a character to fill in for Illic if he did go away, they've kind of already got one ready-made, and quite a fun miniature that was pretty well received as well. I can't help but think that the stuff that's either out of production or in resin is probably going to be top of the priority, though I'd bear in mind that plenty of the other Aeldari plastics are really quite old indeed. The Falcon in particular comes from before the turn of the millennium. I feel like compared with a lot of 40k kits of that era, it really holds up pretty nicely. If anything, maybe the Vipers aged a little bit worse, but I still think they look alright by modern standards, at least compared with some other kits. I'm sure Aeldari players wouldn't be adverse to a redo of the Dire Avengers as well, as it's just kind of famously one of the less easy kits to put together, due to legs and torsos not lining up properly, but mainly having an absolute ton of mould lines. I suppose not impossible they could redo those, but again I feel like the resin aspects are probably a far more high priority than Dire Avengers are, who have some plastic miniatures if old ones. Finally, as with the Guard, the Aeldari are one of the only other armies that have a pretty big Forge World lineup left. A fair few medium-sized grav tanks, but also an aspect in the Shadow Spectres, and also Hornets as well, which are a fairly popular choice as the Forge World stuff goes. I probably wouldn't hold out too much hope for this being directly ported into plastic this time around, unless they break with what they've been doing recently. They do seem kind of odds on to go to Legends and have their models pulled. In any case, though, I feel like the Aeldari really are an army that still needs a fairly massive amount of kits to just bring them up to a bit more of a modern standard, with a lot of their important units jumping into plastic. I do feel like if anything, Games Workshop should probably prioritise the resin aspects getting into plastic, as with the Phoenix Lords, given that that's 7 kits already. Anything else is probably a bonus at that point. It maybe does underline the sheer scale of what they had to do with the Aeldari though, given that they got quite such a massive release wave last time around, and there's still quite a big one to do, even if their only goal is clean up the old Aspect Warriors. In any case though, I think I'll leave this video here for today. What are you hoping to see for the Death Korps of Krieg and the Aeldari? Let me know your thoughts and hopes down in the comments below. Feel free to subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more like this. I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming, with new ones out just about every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the video description if you'd like to help support and keep all the videos coming. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.